It is a Sunday morning in paradise. The date is December 7th, 1941. On the Hawaiian island of Oahu, the sun is just beginning to rise over the Pacific, casting a golden light over the lush green mountains and the sparkling blue water of Pearl Harbor. For the sailors, soldiers, and airmen stationed there, it is a day of rest. The fleet is in. The massive battleships of the Pacific Fleet are moored neatly along Battleship Row. There is a sense of invincible calm. The mess halls are serving breakfast, church bands are practicing on the decks of ships, and many men are sleeping in or planning a day at the beach. But 230 miles north of Oahu, the Pacific Ocean is churning with the wake of an Imperial Japanese Navy strike force. For weeks, they have moved in total radio silence across the empty northern Pacific, hiding in the storms and the swells. Now, the carriers have turned into the wind. The silence is broken by the roar of engines. One by one, Mitsubishi Zero fighters, Val dive bombers, and Kate torpedo bombers lift off the heaving decks. A swarm of 183 aircraft forms the first wave, banking south toward an island that is still waking up. The clock ticks towards 7 a.m. In the waters just outside the harbor entrance, the first shot of the Pacific War is actually fired not from the air, but from the sea. The destroyer USS Ward, patrolling the defensive perimeter, spots the periscope of a midget submarine trying to slip into the harbor behind a supply ship. The Ward engages, firing its guns and dropping depth charges. They sink the intruder. The captain of the Ward immediately radios headquarters. "We have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges upon submarine operating in defensive sea area." It is a clear warning, but as the message works its way through the slow Sunday morning chain of command, it is delayed, analyzed, and ultimately not treated with the urgency it demands. Meanwhile, on the northern tip of Oahu, at Opana Point, two Army privates, George Elliott and Joseph Lockard, are staring at a radar screen. It is primitive technology, but at 7:02 a.m., they see something massive. A blip larger than anything they have ever seen is moving toward the island. They call the information center at Fort Shafter. The officer on duty, Lieutenant Kermit Tyler, assumes the blip is a flight of American B-17 bombers scheduled to arrive from the mainland that morning. He tells the radar operators, "Don't worry about it." The radar station shuts down. The warning is dismissed. At 7:40 a.m., the first wave of Japanese sights the coastline of Oahu. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leading the air attack, slides back his canopy and fires a single flare, the signal to deploy. Seeing no American fighter planes in the sky and no anti-aircraft fire from the ground, he radios the code words "Tora, Tora, Tora" back to the fleet. Tiger, tiger, tiger. It means complete surprise has been achieved.
At 7:48 a.m., the violence begins. The first Japanese planes peel off to attack the airfields. At Wheeler Field and Hickam Field, American warplanes are parked wingtip to wingtip in neat rows to prevent sabotage on the ground. This makes them perfect targets for strafing and bombing. In seconds, the airfields are engulfed in flames. Men rush out of barracks only to be cut down by machine gun fire. The roar of exploding fuel tanks shakes the ground. The primary defense of the island is being destroyed before it can even get off the ground. Minutes later, the main fury descends on Pearl Harbor itself. Torpedo bombers, flying dangerously low just above the water, line up against Battleship Row. They drop specially modified wooden-finned torpedoes designed to run in the shallow waters of the harbor. The USS Oklahoma is hit almost immediately. 3 torpedoes slam into her port side, ripping the hull open. As the massive ship begins to list, more torpedoes strike. The order is given to abandon ship, but it happens too fast. Within roughly 10 minutes, the Oklahoma capsizes, rolling completely over. Hundreds of men are trapped inside the hull, in total darkness as the water rises. Next to her, the USS West Virginia takes 7 torpedo hits. The sheer force of the explosions blows huge holes in her side. Quick thinking by her damage control officer, who orders counterflooding on the opposite side, keeps the ship from capsizing, but she sinks upright into the mud, burning fiercely. Then the horror reaches the USS Arizona. At 8:06 a.m., a high-altitude bomber drops a 1,760-pound armor-piercing bomb. It strikes the Arizona near the second gun turret. The bomb punches through the armored deck and ignites the forward ammunition magazine. The resulting explosion is cataclysmic. A fireball rises hundreds of feet into the air. The concussion wave is so powerful it blows men off the decks of neighboring ships and extinguishes the fires on the repair ship Vestal moored next door. In a fraction of a second, the forward half of the Arizona ceases to exist. 1,177 men, nearly half of the total casualties of the entire attack, are killed instantly or trapped in the inferno. The ship breaks its back and settles to the bottom. By 8:10 a.m., the harbor is a vision of hell. The water is covered in burning oil. The air is thick with black, choking smoke that turns day into night. Sailors are swimming through flames, trying to reach the shore or small rescue boats. Amidst the chaos, heroism emerges. Men man anti-aircraft guns on tilting decks. On the USS Nevada, the ship's band, which had been playing the national anthem for the morning colors ceremony, finishes the song even as strafing bullets chew up the deck around them before running to their battle stations. There is a brief lull around 8:40 a.m. The first wave of Japanese planes withdraws. The American defenders, shocked and battered, try to regroup. Doctors and nurses at the naval hospital rush to treat the flood of wounded, using any supplies they can find. Ammunition lockers are broken open with sledgehammers. The surprise is over. The resistance is beginning. But the reprieve is short. At 8:54 a.m., the second wave of Japanese aircraft arrives. 167 dive bombers and high-level bombers roar over the mountains. The element of surprise is gone now, and the sky is filled with black puffs of American anti-aircraft fire. The Japanese pilots in this second wave face a much stiffer fight, but they still inflict terrible damage. Their primary targets are the ships that were missed in the first run and the dry docks. The USS Pennsylvania, the flagship of the fleet sitting in dry dock, is strafed and bombed. The destroyers Cassin and Downs, also in dry dock, are set ablaze. Their torpedo warheads explode, reducing the ships to twisted metal.
The most dramatic moment of the second wave involves the USS Nevada. She is the only battleship to get underway. Seeing the ship moving toward the harbor mouth, Japanese dive bombers swarm her, hoping to sink her in the narrow channel and bottle up the entire fleet. Bomb after bomb strikes the Nevada. Her superstructure is wrecked, and fires rage out of control. Realizing that sinking in the channel would be a strategic disaster, the Nevada's officers make the difficult decision to beach the ship at Hospital Point. She runs aground, battered but defiant. By 9:45 a.m., the attacks begin to taper off. The Japanese planes, low on fuel and ammunition, turn back toward their carriers. Commander Fuchida lingers for a moment to assess the damage, snapping photographs of the devastation before he too heads north. Back on the Japanese carriers, there is a debate. The pilots, exhilarated by their success, want to launch a third wave. They want to hit the fuel oil tanks and the dry dock repair facilities, infrastructure that is vital for the Americans to fight back. But Admiral Nagumo, the commander of the task force, is cautious. He knows the American aircraft carriers were not in the harbor. He does not know where they are. Fearing a counterstrike against his own ships, he decides he has done enough. He orders the fleet to turn for home. As the noise of the engines fades, a stunned silence falls over Oahu, broken only by the crackle of fires and the screams of the wounded. The devastation is absolute. In less than 2 hours, the U.S. Pacific Fleet has been shattered. 8 battleships are damaged or sunk. More than 300 aircraft have been destroyed or damaged. The human cost is staggering. 2,403 Americans, sailors, soldiers, and civilians are dead. Another 1,178 are wounded. It is the worst naval disaster in American history. Throughout the rest of the day, the island is gripped by fear. Rumors fly that a Japanese landing force is approaching the beaches. Soldiers dig trenches, civilians black out their windows. But the invasion never comes. Instead, the reality of the situation settles in. The Japanese tactical victory was brilliant and complete. They achieved total surprise and destroyed the striking power of the American battleship fleet. But strategically, the attack was a failure. By missing the aircraft carriers, they left the U.S. Navy with its most important offensive weapon intact. By failing to destroy the oil reserves and repair shops, they allowed Pearl Harbor to remain a functional naval base. And most importantly, by attacking without a declaration of war, they united a divided American public with a cold, terrible resolve. Before the smoke had even cleared, the salvage crews were already at work. Cranes began to lift debris. Divers went into the dark, oil-filled water to cut into the hulls of sunken ships to save trapped men. Remarkably, all but 3 of the ships sunk or damaged that day would eventually be raised, repaired, and sent back to fight the Japanese. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress. His voice steady but filled with anger, he called December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The attack on Pearl Harbor was intended to demoralize the United States, to scare it into staying out of the Pacific. Instead, it awoke a sleeping giant. The surprise attack that took place over those terrifying 90 minutes didn't end the story of the United States in World War II, it began it.